Welcome to Rugby in Lockdown, a new weekly webinar series from the Rugby Journal. We're going to be here every Tuesday from 1 p.m. discussing different topics with people from the world of rugby. One thing I would like to say to start off with is that nobody on this panel, or indeed the Rugby Journal, believes anything is more important than safety right now. But we have to talk about something, so rugby is the best topic, so let's do that. We've got a great panel. We've got Phil Davies from Yorkshire Carnegie. We've got Steve Hill from Richmond, and to start off with, we've got Paul Turner from Ampthill, who's just led the Bedfordshire club to 5th place in the championship. So well done, Paul. What an achievement.
Yeah, it's been good for our club, small community club, coming through the leagues and attempting our first sort of go at the championship. And yeah, real credit to the club and the players and the staff and all the people that made it possible, really.
So what's happened in your life, obviously, since the lockdown? Whereabout are you locked down in St Albans, or what are you up to?
Yeah, locked down in St Albans, and fortunately got a little bit of a garden, and the weather's been quite kind to us. Same as everyone else, I would have thought, trying to do things, spoke to a lot of the squad, but they're obviously in lockdown and can't really move on a lot of things at the moment due to the climate and the way things have gone on. Obviously, this has happened now, and it probably takes more precedence than any sport, I suppose.
And in terms of the actual club itself, what impact has this already had on a club like Ampthill, a community club?
Oh, huge! You know, we still had a lot of fixtures left. We still had home fixtures. We've got a huge community section and a big junior section as well. So all that's gone by the wayside, really. And then, you know, when do we start up again? So who knows, really? It's actually day to day, isn't it? Things happen, and as a club, you know, as I said earlier, we've come through the leagues, similar to the guys on the panel as well, but got good plans. With hopefully a new ground in 2 years' time, if that goes ahead, and yeah, a lot of intent and ambition at the club, but with this happening now, who knows what the future holds, really.
Because in terms of the financial strain, because obviously, you know, you're not a club with a huge benefactor, you're relying on the sponsors. Are you having meetings about what if it goes on for this long or this long? You know, how are you dealing with that side of things?
Well, and you know, obviously, what was it, 6 weeks ago now, there was the news that the championship budget was being cut for next season, and then all this happened. So who knows, when are we going to start up again? As I say, it's day to day, and the way things are happening at the moment, are we going to start in September? The longer it goes on, even that will be in doubt, I would have thought. And then away from the rugby until a vaccine is found, then I can't see anything taking place. So who knows? We may not start till January.
And how many players have you? Because obviously recruitment's one thing. What's your squad like at the moment? Because presumably you started recruitment. Are they your players now? If you had signed up anyone, what's your squad like? What's the status there?
Well, we did start recruitment. First time ever we started recruitment before the end of one season, and then all this happened. So, you know, and like everybody, I suppose, current players, keeping your own current players should be the first task, and I don't think everybody has done that at the moment. We certainly haven't. You know, our players are all on 1-year contracts, so you know, that must be in doubt. And then when we start up again, I suppose we're not exactly, you know, we're all the same in this. You know, the Premiership guys have got to be similar to that. And until we talk to the union about money and budgets for next season, which hasn't happened yet, then then who knows what we've got in the pot.
When were they expected to get back to you? Even before this, when they were, presumably there was, after they agreed that it was going to be 50% that was going to be cut, presumably there was a timeline where you were going to sit down with them again. Was that about now, or is that already
I think
passed?
mid-April, Steve, it was talked about, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I think they were going to reassess it at mid-April, and the last that we'd heard was it was going to go up from the original thing, but it wasn't going to be as much as this year. But there's been no confirmation yet of what money the clubs will be getting in the championship next year from the RFU.
I think a statement came out 2 weeks ago, was it, about grassroots? The championship wasn't even mentioned, so it's got to be, sooner rather than later. Really, something's got to be. But whether they can make those decisions, I don't know.
The championship would feel like it's in the most perilous position because it's caught between this halfway house as well. So there's the funding issue, and I've got a feeling there's the sponsor is either finished or is about to finish as well.
Yeah, sponsors finished. IPA's Green Kings stepped away. It was the final year last year.
So this is the guide to both you guys. There must be big worries about the championship now at the moment.
Huge.
Yeah, certainly.
So in terms of the rest of your plans, so at the moment you've got a squad that, are any clubs signing players up? Because obviously if you're not able, without a financial backer, to sign people, are clubs start signing players? Have you lost any players at all that have been signed up because you've not been able to make a move?
You're asking me?
Yeah, sorry, Paul.
Well, most of our players I haven't seen since that Monday that we finished. So we talked once as a group on Zoom about 2 weeks ago. I think we're all in limbo. I think trying to make plans. I met last week with Mark Avery, the director of rugby, and we can make plans, but they say day to day, and if we don't know what we've got, those plans are superficial, really. Yeah,
and okay. Let's sort of move on. Phil, do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of what you've been up to? Because obviously your season ended sort of prematurely as well. How do you feel about what's been happening, and what have you been up to with your players?
We just before the lockdown, we started looking at where was next for the club. Really, in January, I went back after the World Cup to try and offer support and to the club with a few other people. But we looked at was it impossible to stay in the championship? Well, I don't think anything is impossible, but it was very improbable. So that was a sort of the mindset. We had a very young group of players who were experienced, but lots of endeavour. So we were just looking at, or we've been looking at the plan of where the club can go next and how we can reset the club and rebuild it after an interesting couple of years where the club wasn't potentially, well, not potentially, it wasn't going in the direction that people wanted it to go in terms of competing in the championship, etc. So we've just been looking at that plan and speaking to the players, lots of conversations with the investors and the board to try and ensure that we have a plan that can reset the club in the first instance and then rebuild and try and create momentum in order to get back into the championship as a sustainable club. That's the idea, and that's the massive sort of challenge that we're looking to to undertake at the moment. Personally, I've been just accumulating a lot of brownie points with my wife. So I've cut the lawn for the first time in 35 years, apparently. So I've cleaned the windows, so that's gone down quite well, and just taking a bit of time to reflect, really, which was the idea after the World Cup, was to just have a think about the wonderful experience we had in Africa, coaching Namibia the last 5 years. There's quite a lot of jumping on planes and spending 20 odd, I think it was about 22 weeks on average a year away. So there's a lot of stuff to be grateful for and to reflect on and have a bit of time. So that's sort of what I've been up to over the last few weeks, really.
And obviously, going back to Leeds, what was the situation? What were the big areas that you saw? Were you surprised by what you saw when you came back? You know, what were the major things that you feel you need to do to help Leeds get back to where they are?
I knew they were, obviously I knew they were having a tough time because I've kept in touch with a lot of people there since I left back in 2006, 2007. So yeah, it was as I expected because I had a fair amount of understanding of what was going on. But the team was, the lads were very young, the coaching was young. There were people there with a lot of sort of endeavour, but there was a little bit of a lack of experience. And the club had sort of the support base, both on and off the field, had dwindled quite considerably to what we sort of left behind a few years ago. So it was a tough situation, but we're a very willing bunch of players. And coaching staff. I can't say enough about the players in particular. Their effort and their commitment was amazing, but ultimately we just weren't good enough, and we'd make critical errors at crucial times in the game, and that cost us dearly in lots of games. But we were improving. Things were getting better from a performance aspect, but we weren't able to make a dent in the scoreboard. And as the season was going on, I think we would have got a little bit better. Whether we would have won any games is another story. But the endeavour was there, and it was a tough situation that the players trying to make the best of, really.
And where does that leave you from your squad point of view? Because switching divisions as well, you were going to presumably make changes. How many players have you got? Had you made many plans already for next season?
Yeah, we had a sort of overview of a structure, and that's all you can do is control the controllables, I suppose, at the moment. In terms of we're looking at what it could look like. All things being equal. In terms of staffing, in terms of players. So we spoke to people I were interested in continuing to be involved with the club or to help with the rebuild. We try to create an old boys network where we've had some terrific responses on that. So we've got I think about 25 players at the moment that are interested in being involved in the rebuild. A lot of them are students who are staying in Leeds, and who live in and around the Leeds area, which is important. We need a group of players that actually live within half an hour of the training ground, not as last year we had some players who put amazing commitment in, but they were living some of them an hour and a half, 2 hours away from training, which is tough when you're working full time and then you've got to train 3 times a week like we started doing in the end. So we've got a basis of what we'd like it, what it's going to look like for us, and we have a group of players that are interested in helping the rebuild. So but as Paul said and Steve said, there's so many variables and unknown at the moment. That's all we can try and do is try and put a car on the start line, if you like, and then try and drive it in a direction when we know a little bit more about what the league's going to look like, when we're going to start, what the funding is, etc., etc.
Were you, in terms of the financial strain this might put you under, from a club point of view, because your players were going to be a bit more of a mixed bag because you hadn't agreed? Is that a saving grace of any sort?
It's just, I think moving forward, I think you're just going to, the exciting thing for me is just going to maybe challenge the conventional way of thinking about building a rugby team or running a rugby club. So we're going to look at, because a lot of students, that's one area that's forward. They study, they play for the university, and they come and play for the club, hopefully, as well. And then we're just going to look at linking with some partners in Leeds where we can provide training and skill, extra skills in order for people to go into the business world and try and link with with commercial partners and get the thing, maybe like Steve's model in with Richmond in London, where people can have jobs and they can play rugby as well. So that's how it's going to be, for us for a few years until we can build ourselves back to where the club would like to be, really. So it's going to be a model of semi-professional part-time players working and playing rugby. So it's going back to our day, really, which would be interesting. Are
the goals still the same as when you took the job last time?
I I think, there's a lot of things changed, for us at this moment in time. Being a sustainable championship club, which is good practice, in terms of coaching and talent ID, governance and commercial revenue. I think those are the 4 key pillars that we've got to try and, we're going to try and work on and try and be the best we can actually be in those areas. And hopefully that will take us back to being a sustainable championship club. And, the landscape of rugby changes every so often. And, you never know, Leeds is in Yorkshire. Yorkshire's, England's biggest rugby playing county. So there are lots of positives that we can take moving forward. But firstly, we need to get the club reset and try and, get back into the championship in due course, doing things right, doing things well, and earning the respect and credibility that is important for any rugby club at the end of the day.
And obviously off the field as well, there's aspects we talked about. The branding that's been mentioned before, that you're going to change the name of the club. Is that still the case? When's that going to happen?
I think there's a deadline, the end of May, I think, if you want to submit the name change. The name change, for me, it's always been Leeds. We're in the middle of Leeds, we're in Headingley. Back in the day, we were, we're a proud member of the Yorkshire Rugby Union. And that's how I've always seen it, and that's how a lot of people within the city have seen it as well. So, hopefully we will go back to, Leeds of some sort, whether it's Leeds Tykes or Leeds Rugby, I don't know. But, we're definitely, going to be called Leeds something by going into next season, I hope, anyway. But there's a few T's to be crossed and I's to be dotted by the administrators before that can happen.
Okay. Steve, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of what you've been up to? Because obviously you've got a few hats there with basically overseeing all of the rugby at Richmond, the men, the women, etc. So let's talk about the men first and what happened there.
I'm very much sort of, staying in touch with the guys since obviously the sort of the lockdown came and that sort of, on the phone, but also, using things like, as we are here, Zoom and house party and that sort of stuff. So just staying in touch. I mean, when, the season initially was going to be finished, Ian Taplin, who heads up our strength and conditioning department through his company, Arete, we're sending out programs, putting together sort of, videos and that sort of stuff. So we wanted the guys to stay active, and we sort of carried that on for sort of 2 or 3 weeks. We're now having a 2 or 3 weeks where the guys are going to have, virtually their downtime between seasons because, I happen to think it's important. I know it sounds strange, but you have to turn off from rugby a little bit.
They get a closed season.
Yeah, exactly. So this is our closed season. They've still got some stuff to do, but they're not going to have Ian in their ear sort of every minute. So that's very much in terms of keeping in contact with those guys because all of my guys have got full-time daytime jobs. It's also finding out how they've got on because some of those guys are fine. They've still got their working 9 to 5, but from home. Whereas other guys have lost their jobs or they've lost many hours and whatever else, and just whether the club whether we can help those guys in some particular way or whatever else, just making sure everybody's fine in our particular rugby family. So that's been an important part of what's been going on. And then, just staying very close together. I mean, Thursday evening, they have the Thursday night lager club, which has continued on house party, which is a bit different. And again, at the end of our season, our awards evening for the whole club happens at the end of the year. And in fact, this Friday evening, we're having a Zoom party with 100 people on it, where we'll make the awards for this year because, it feels a bit strange. We were very lucky this year. We had a very successful season. That the first team did really well and got promoted. The second team won their league and had an unbeaten season. And, we don't want to forget those things, and we want to sort of celebrate that. So those are sorts of things that we're doing. And again, that's another vehicle, just to keep everybody in touch with everybody. And I think at this particular time, when you see an awful lot of four walls or your partner or your flatmates, actually staying in touch with other people is really important. So those are sorts of things that we've been doing since the lockdowns come on.
And I'd like actually quickly ask that question as well, because someone's asked it as well. Sort of Paul and Phil, what else are you guys doing in terms of keeping the players active? Is your S&C still making sure they're doing certain things, or what approach have you guys taken?
Similar, really, to Steve. been in touch with them. Excuse me, I was just answering a couple of your questions on here. But yeah, it's obviously difficult because some players won't know whether they're going to be with us or not next season. So it's all in the melting pot at the moment. But we've kept in touch with them via those sort of house party and Zoom situations. So other than that, is to try and get them to be disciplined and keep themselves fit in the meantime.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we'll get something at the end of this.
Yeah. Because I mean, that feel from your side as well. Presumably, it's also keeping all the players mentally sharp. That must be a bit of an issue for people as well. What impact it has there?
Yeah, we've similar to Steve and Paul. You know, Wayne Proctor and Ian Kirk, our conditioners, have kept in touch with the boys, and they've given them the programs. I think it's what do we know? April, is it? I think the middle of May we'll give them a little bit more. The boys were staying on anyway. We'll give them a little bit more downtime. But we're going to look after all the players really until the end of their contracts. You know, the physio has been really good in terms of giving the rehab programs out to the players who sort of were injured at the time of sort of the season, time of the lockdown. So yeah, I've been in touch with a few of the lads individually more than collectively, because as we said, we don't know what's going to happen moving forward. But we've been in touch and making sure, as Steve said, that they're all okay and they're in a good place, or best position they could be in given the current circumstances.
And so go back to Steve. So Steve, now obviously National One sort of finished a few games early there. You've been up top all the time anyway. Was that different to when you were there last? Because you were only there a few years ago, but it felt like it was a bit of a different league.
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly think that the standard of rugby in National One has significantly improved since we were there 4 years ago, and I think across the board. I mean, I think you've only got to look at the results in that, every Saturday there was what you might call a surprise result, but after sort of about 8 or 9 Saturdays, it wasn't a surprise result because always, somebody was able to beat somebody else virtually every weekend. And I mean, after 25 games, we'd lost 5 out of 25, and yet, we'd lost the least of anybody. So from that point of view, it just showed how competitive that league was. And I think, that's because a lot of awfully good players have, permeated down from the Premiership into the Championship and then Championship into National One. I mean, some of the squads, I mean, our main competitors, sort of Rosslyn Park and Chinner, had a whole host of, guys who've got with Premiership and Championship experience, which just show how the quality of National One has sort of have risen. So, and, it was a really exciting league. I mean, I was really impressed with, the positive way in which the vast majority of teams wanted to play. They came out to play. It wasn't dominated by set piece or dominated by defences, and I think that was really exciting. And I know talking to our spectators, I mean the fact that they got league rugby every weekend, they really enjoyed, and the standard of rugby they watched, that they also really enjoyed. I'm not quite sure the players want to play 16 Saturdays on the bounce between September and Christmas, but from a spectator's point of view, that was a great fair to watch. So no, but it was it's a cracking league, and I think people who go in and out of the league would say that, whether they go up into it or come down into it, it's very exciting and very challenging.
And one question that's come up as well from Richard Williams, which Paul's already answered on the Q&A box, but presumably, there's a big role for national leagues, and it's not about players on the way down; it's also about players on the way up in terms of the development of future Premiership and international players.
Oh, I mean, I think it's huge, and I mean, it was quite a strange consequence of us being relegated from the Championship. It was actually much easier to attract and recruit really good young players, coming out of universities or coming out, being released by academies, because I think a lot of them saw that the opportunity to play first team at National One would be closer to them than it was if they'd been to a Championship club. And a lot of those players have then, in the time, over the last 3 or 4 years, then gone on to get Championship, opportunities. I mean, 3 of my part-time players from the previous season, they went on to be full-time. One at Irish, one at Quins, one at Jersey, and in fact, the prop Will Goodrich Clark did 3 years at Oxford Brookes University. He was playing for us. When he graduated, he's gone full time now to London Irish. So, didn't go through an academy, didn't play for England 18s or England students, anything like that, and very much used that pathway. So I think that the NCA leagues, National One in particular, is a great pathway for these players because they're playing rugby.
Yeah,
we were very fortunate. 7 years ago, we had a young tight head called Carl Sinclair playing for us. Carl played 19 matches that season for Richmond first team.
Yeah,
as an 18, 19-year-old, playing against some of these, 30-year-old loose heads, down at places like Cinderford and Plymouth Albion and places like that, was a fantastic learning curve for him. Rather than playing, half a dozen A-League matches, he's just on a Monday night, playing in meaningful games on a Saturday afternoon. I'm sure was an aid to his and other. Paul. It's got Louis Grimaldi. Louis was, again, 5 years ago, Louis was playing for us as a young, academy fly half. And I'm sure that was playing at National One level was a really important part of his development. So I think it's definitely part of that pathway that should be on.
Which side should Phil be looking out for next season?
All of them.
That's a difficult thing. I think, anybody finished in the top 8, I would suggest.
Yeah.
The matches we lost, we lost obviously home and away to Rosslyn Park, but our other losses were, Plymouth Albion, Sale, Cinderford, teams that finished mid-table, all very, very strong sides, particularly on their home patches.
Yeah.
Plymouth very strong forwards, Cinderford always strong. It's never any fun going to the Forest of Dean, because they're so passionate down there, and that's what that makes it exciting. So I think the likes of Rosslyn Park and Chinner and Darlington, Moden Park and Blackheath will be there or thereabouts, but there'll be some other ones as well, I'm sure.
There's also sides that have come up like Rams again. Their first season up there as well. They did really well.
No, sorry, I forgot. Rams have done brilliantly. It's interesting now. I think if you look at it, quite often over the last couple of seasons, teams that have been promoted have struggled.
Yeah.
The Canterbury's, your Hull Ionians, and some of the lower leagues. But Rams sort of, did fantastically well. And they were very strong. So they'll just get better and better. So
obviously, you've had great news in that going up to the championship, but obviously on the flip side, you've also been involved in the TP15s tender process. Tell me about that. Firstly, was this different to last time? So was it the same criteria that you were judged by, or tell me about the process.
Well, the process was the teams that finished in the top 6 positions didn't have to retender for their place. We weren't in the top 6, so we were one of the 4 clubs that had to retender if you chose to. One of those 4 chose not to retender. And new clubs who wanted to come in and be part of it got an opportunity. The criteria, the minimum standards, were very similar to the last time. So from that point of view, there wasn't anything particularly new. And so we filled in the very, very long document. Laura Jenkins, who's our board member and sort of on the board heads the women's section. She played for many, many years for the women's section, sort of led that particular process. And then there was we had a 90-minute Zoom meeting, with the different people at the RFU, asked, a range of questions, which we gave the answers. And then we sat there and waited for about a week or so. So that was effectively the process.
And what, obviously, I presume everyone, all the attendees know, but obviously they didn't get awarded one. Who got awarded? Tell me who came in and who went out.
So ourselves and Furwood Waterloo lost the places, and replacing us were Sale and Exeter.
Okay, so obviously this was something that had been reported that it was kind of expected. What feedback did you kind of get, and were you surprised?
A little bit. The feedback was not that specific. One of the points made was they thought maybe some of the other clubs that were mentioned could be able to develop their players in a professional league situation, but which surprises a bit because I wasn't aware that Tyrrell's 15 is a professional league. Obviously it's aspiring to be as good as it can be. So I think we were. At Richmond we were very angry. After 35 years of being at the head of that game, of the women's game in this country, not to be given a place, we were very angry about. And I think we're also angry about the fact you can't appeal. Okay. There is no appeal process in place. You can appeal against the actual process, but there's no appeal for the reasons. So as a club, we've had to accept it, but that's because there was no alternative, and so that's basically where we are.
Is there? I've only seen last year's. I haven't seen this year's list of criteria. Is there like a commercial aspect? Like, how are you going to build a following? How, is it all about performance, or is there something about building fan bases?
There's certainly questions about things like your social media and the commercial side in terms of your partners and support, whatever else. But no, there's no specific targets about fan bases or building a crowd or whatever. So no, that certainly wasn't part of it. And I think the thing that frustrated us, every year each of the clubs is assessed, have you passed the minimum standards required? And every year we passed every minimum standard.
Yeah.
And we're aware that certain other clubs didn't pass every minimum standard every year, sort of thing. But so that's that sort of added to our frustration. But at the end of the day, they made a judgment, and we've now got to sort of effectively pick up the pieces a bit.
It strikes me that this could have been an opportunity for, given that the general consensus is the way professional rugby kicked off in the country didn't quite work. Could not a provincial system have worked in women's game? Or because at the moment the men's game's not making money hand over fist, there's only one club, as we all talk about. Could this have been an opportunity for a different system of professional rugby in women to be developed, and you could have gone regional or something else?
I mean, I think things have all been done with the best intention. I must admit, my question I have is, there are 28 centrally contracted England players in the Tyrrells 15 and whatever else, but 14 of those 28 are at two clubs, Harlequins and Saracens. Now, centrally contracted players, the RFU could tell those players where they could go and play. But at the moment, half of that squad are at two clubs, and surprise, surprise, every year the final is between Harlequins and Saracens. Yeah. And I think in many ways, maybe they've missed a bit of a trick in terms of spreading that talent and spreading that ability. So I think that is. I mean, regional. If it was regional, the RFU have to fund a lot. I think when Phil, Paul, and myself were playing, the divisional series came in and whatever else, and that had to be funded by the RFU because the clubs weren't interested in funding from a regional point of view. But it does, it's surprising that we're going down paths that haven't necessarily worked in the men's game, and they're continuing the women's game, and that's obviously a little bit frustrating. And the reality is, question I've got is, where does Sale and Exeter get their squads from? Yeah, Exeter currently doesn't have a women's section. Yeah. So they need 40 Premiership caliber players for July. Yeah. Or they'll just go and steal them from other clubs. Yeah. And is that what the RFU wants them to be doing? I mean, I don't know. They're not questions you get to ask. So it's just it's interesting to see how things are going. And it just feels a bit like they want all the clubs associated with Premiership clubs. Now, if that was the criteria from the beginning, fine, tell us. But that wasn't one of the minimum requirements, and I think therefore, but the fact that Sale and Exeter get awarded it, Worcester have stayed in there, but Worcester have been bottom of the league for the last 3 years, even being linked with a Premiership club sort of thing. Yeah. So I think maybe that's why our girls in particular were very frustrated with the result.
And where does that leave you? Where does that leave your players? Are they? What are they going to do? Where are you going in the league? Presumably they've just told you you're going to be in the Championship or something.
No, we haven't heard yet. The RFU are yet to make a decision on that. So our players are very much in limbo. I mean, we are a club that people come and play rugby at Richmond because they want to play at Richmond, and I'm sure the vast majority of our girls will stay. Our better girls will have to leave. I mean, Rowena Burfield, who's been an England player for the last 5 or 6 years, she's got no choice now. She has to leave the club she's always played for to carry on playing rugby if she's going to carry on playing and being in the England squad, which is a bit sad. But I mean, that's the reality of that, and she sort of expects that. Everybody else, I mean, those who want to play in the Tyrrells will move on. And in London, you've got 3 other clubs: Harlequins, Wasps, and Saracens. But I would hope that we'll get a place in the Championship, which is the next level down. There's only one London club in the Championship, which is Blackheath, and so very much our women's section is going to be in a similar situation, I think, to maybe where Leeds are going to be next year. We've got to reset. We've got to redefine what we're aiming to do. But we're very fortunate. We had 63 girls play for our women's section this year, the vast majority of those I expect to stay. So we've got a good core to stay and compete in that championship.
Okay, great. So let's move on to some questions that we've kind of had in. These ones that were from before, via social, direct email, and also the Q&A. So when do you think the season will start? So obviously no one knows anything, but given there's so many different parameters here, how much notice do you need even for the season?
I suppose everyone's got to, we're obviously trying to prepare. Never thought I'd say it, in April for September now. So obviously there's no championship is finished, and the only thing we can do is try and prepare for end of June start, I suppose, for September, the first start of the season. That's the only thing we can do. Now, it may change week to week, day to day, but I suppose you've got to have some sort of plan.
I mean, Alex, I think from the championship point of view, there's a big question to be asked, because my understanding is the current plan is the championship doesn't start till September the 19th.
Yeah.
It goes on to May the 16th.
Yeah.
Because it wants to be more aligned with the Premiership season. But I think post-COVID-19, the difference between the Championship and Premiership is going to be magnified.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be more part-time players in the Championship than there was last year. Do we want to be that closely linked with the Premiership if that's the direction that the game is going in, sort of thing?
Yeah.
But I think, whenever we start, we're going to need, at least 6 to 8 weeks to get the guys prepared.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing. I mean, you hear on the news this morning, Premiership Rugby are hoping to start again. Well, those guys are going to need 6 weeks preparation before they go back into actually playing matches.
Yeah.
The guys haven't been able to lift a weight, for a month and whatever else. So I think, that's got to be built into what any equation comes, or any dates that come on board.
Do you guys collectively as championship clubs, has there been communication between you guys at all from working out what you might be thinking? Because obviously there's so many variables in the championship at the moment. Do you get together at all, or communication?
I think that's for people with higher pay grades than Paul and myself.
I think this is supposed to be something happening today with, they will meet our people, but, as I said earlier, the crucial thing is funding, and that isn't until mid-April. I've heard today is probably going to be late April. So till that happens, then, it's very much sort of status quo.
Does this, obviously the other debate that's happening at all the same time, or just for this, was obviously promotion and relegation, which keeps coming up. Does this hinder the case for keeping the Premiership open, something like this? Because as you mentioned then, Steve, the gap could become even bigger, or what impact do you see on that debate?
I mean, I think the gap is huge already, and this what's happening now will only make that gap even larger.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a question of if; it simply is a question of when. The drawbridges get pulled up.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So. But I mean, when that happens, I'm not sure, but I'm sure it will happen at some stage, particularly with, people like CVC getting involved and whatever else.
Yeah.
In terms of to grow the game at the very top level, one team up, one team down every season. I'm not sure how those two things align.
I think, Steve, a good question for me would be, and I think Paul would bear this out in terms of the Welsh Premiership, is the Championship, is it the second tier of professional rugby in England, or is it, the top of the community game in England? So a clearly defined role, because I agree. I think Richie put the question up earlier. I agree that the Championship, I think, is a fantastic place to blood, the next generation of players, coaches, referees, into a meaningful competitive league structure. And it's the same in Wales with the Welsh Premiership. I don't think that has had a clear identity for a number of years. But I think that's a good question to ask, because, when you see the type of the coaching standards in National 1, as you said, Steve, in the Championship, which I've experienced again very recently. You know, the standard of players, you know, there's some talent there. There's a lot of good talent there, which can be nurtured and grown and developed and put into, you know, and go on to higher levels, you know. So I think that's the good question: is what is the role of the championship? And I think that would answer a lot of a lot of problems potentially, and give it a real identity.
And I think, Phil, just coming on that, I mean, you know, considering the championship is the league that the RFU controls,
correct.
You know, it's very sad that we don't have that vision or knowledge now. You know, and you know, fair enough, Bill Sweeney is the current incumbent, but you know, the previous two, Mr. Melville and Mr. Andrew, avoided that particular question. And I think you're absolutely right. It's key to the future. You know, what does it mean? What is it about? And if we don't know that, you know, if you don't know your destination, how do you know if you're on the right particular path? And I think it's a really important question to answer.
Presumably, it's also about engaging different communities outside those top 12 clubs, because at the end of the day, you're not going to travel from, you know, if there was no, you know, there's a lot of distances here. If you're down on the South Kent coast, you're not necessarily going to go all the way up to Harlequins every weekend or up to Saracens. So you need clubs elsewhere in the country to engage them. And in Wales, the Premiership, could have been this sort of league that sort of promoted individual communities. So got the people in Merthyr watching rugby because they weren't ever going to go and watch Cardiff, you know. So it was about having quality rugby all the way around the country rather than just in pockets that people just take or leave, as we've sort of seen in Wales.
I think years ago, I think it was 2008, 2009, Joe Lydon was the head of performance, rugby high performance, in Wales, and he set up a national academy. And the idea was to link the national academy with the Premiership clubs, obviously the regions, but the Premiership clubs, in order to find the next generation of players, coaches and referees. And I thought that was a great pathway and a great idea. And, you know, like Paul does, you know, his work, you know, the exile programs are there. And I think a lot of programs could have been linked into the Premiership in Wales to widen our playing base, and also to improve the standards of that league in order to prepare players to play professional rugby if they were good enough and if that was their sort of their goal, if you like. But also, you know, it would have created a far more entertaining and competitive league, which you could have had the 12 clubs. I think it was 12 clubs he was looking at, that could have been as competitive as possible and driven best practice through that, as I said earlier, in coaching, you know, in governance, analysis, whatever it might be, all those key things. To get a competitive league. But because there's never been a real clear focus on what it's all about, those things haven't happened, you know.
Yeah.
And that's another question for other people to answer.
Are we heading for a British League, guys? Given this all gets sorted, are we heading for? Is this the time for a British League? Do England want it? Do Wales want it? Do Ireland? Do Scotland? Are we looking at the British League in the future?
And what, Paul? Instead of what? Because we've got too many games now.
Well, it'll be instead of Pro 14 and Premiership, won't it? You know.
I mean, certainly things like the Premiership Cup and in the Championship Cup. You know, there's got to be better answers than they've currently got for those particular competitions.
But they've tried that, and I think they tried British and Irish, all that sort of.
Yeah, and they haven't worked. So there's got to be something different. But I mean, it's interesting. You know, we're very much talking about the Championship, National One, top end of the game. You know, just as much concern, to me is the very bottom end, is the number of players playing, because the reality is in this country, the number of players playing 15-a-side contact rugby every year is going down every year.
Yeah,
and I think that's a whole area that really does need addressing, because our pyramid is becoming narrower and narrower. And I think that's something that needs some serious looking at. And I think hopefully when we come out at the end of this, whatever this means, there'll be some people looking through some really strong lenses at that part of the game, because I think that'll be the key to going forward. I think, clubs have got to become clubs again, not just first teams. Yeah. And I take my hat off to a club like Ampthill, who've risen all the way through, top half of the championship, but they've retained that club ethos and that whole club ability, very similar to us. And I think that's what more clubs have got to do. And it sounds a little bit like you're turning back the clock, but sometimes you have to do that. And I do think that's going to be a key thing going forward.
There's a couple of questions that kind of tie into this as well. So Richard Hale, whilst he asked about what you're doing to keep players occupied, he also said, what about the communities? So it's also about keeping your fans and the communities around engaged with the club. Is there anything you guys have been able to do on that front to keep, the Richmond rugby loving public or the Ampthill, engaged with the club?
Yeah, I think that's where social media these days comes in. We're very lucky, and Tom Salisbury heads our social media. So, every day I'm seeing, tries of the week, pictures from yesteryear, and all that sort of stuff. As Paul was saying earlier, we all seem to be talking to our friends that we played with, 20, 30 years ago. And it's a great way to sort of look back into the history of our clubs and what our clubs meant. So I think through, social media, through, WhatsApp and tweeting and Facebook and things like that, that's got to be one of the ways to re-engage, because as sad as I think it is, most of my players spend their day on the phone. So it's things like that. So yeah, it's important that we do stay engaged with all those fans, because when this gets started, we need them coming out in their droves to support the team, and that's the bottom line.
Phil, talking about it earlier on, and you guys, different models, I think, Richmond and certainly Leeds, big city to Ampthill. I'm finding what's coming out of this is we're probably going to go back to looking for more local talent for your teams, because I think we grew up in different times, all three of us. Who did you want to play for, Phil, when you were a kid?
Scarlets, mate.
You didn't, mate. You wanted to play for Seven Sisters, and you know it. He's a Seven Sisters boy, and he wanted to play for Seven Sisters.
I agree.
Who did you have your first Welsh youth cap from, Phil?
Seven Sisters.
Seven Sisters, exactly. And I was Newbridge and Crumlin. They were my two sides. They're a mile apart. Times have changed, boys. We all know it. Times have changed. People never used to leave their villages. And I think something that may come out of all this again is people will have to go back, not to the drawing board, but to square one and say, look, what are we all about? We've all gone into the professional era, and there's retainers and wages and accommodation and all those things. But you guys, I know your model, Steve, and it's because of geographically where you were situated.
Yeah.
But it's kind of worked for you, and I've got to take my hat off to the Richmond club, it's not only this era that they've come through an era that I was involved with sort of 20 years ago when Ashley Levette took over, and I played for Bedford at that time, in the what was the championship, and I think we both got promoted eventually, but didn't quite work for either, really. No. So similar, with Phil, understand what's happened there. Leeds Rhinos are still doing okay, by the way, and yeah, that's a long story. But we may be the same. I'm sensing, even over the last week or two, of people getting in touch with me that have left our area and gone to pastures new, but becoming available again. And I think local is going to become more vogue. But you two are a little bit different for me because of the geography and the big cities that you're in. But it's great what Ampthill have done. And there's more to come, hopefully, but it may sort of be a wake-up call to say, look, let's start looking a little bit more local as well.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions also Reg Clark had said, the way that whilst rugby is developing in new areas, new parts of the world, ultimately at grassroots level in the developed countries, the numbers are reducing. So this could be a shot in the arm in a way for grassroots rugby, or it could be a chance to redress the local game. I think that's what you're saying, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely key, and I'm similar here to Paul and Phil, where we played the vast majority of our rugby, on a Saturday afternoon because we wanted to, not because somebody paid us to do it. And I think there's going to be a lot more rugby players next season playing for their love of the game, because people aren't going to be able to offer the money they've been offering over the last 10, 15 years. And in many ways, if you think about it, clubs at level 4, 5, 6, 7 paying players to play on a Saturday afternoon, that's money simply going out of that club on a Saturday.
Yeah.
For what?
Yeah.
For what? To get promotion. But if you get promoted from level 7 to level 6, you don't get any money. You get to travel further, and you probably have to recruit new players. So expenses go up. So whereas that rather that money spent on on facilities for the club, on better coaching, on an end of season tour, things like that. And I do think that clubs will have to relook at all this, because the finance won't be there. I mean, most local rugby clubs depend on local sponsors helping them out, not because it's a commercial judgment, because they like the rugby club, they know somebody there. Well, many small businesses now are not going to have spare cash, to give to local sports clubs or whatever else. And I think from that point of view, people are going to have a really long, hard look. Should we be paying these players for what they're doing in an afternoon? And I'm sure many clubs will decide, actually, no, we can't carry on if we're going to do that. And I don't think that's any bad thing. I really don't. I think in National 1 next year, I think the money that's paid to players will significantly reduce to what it was this year.
Yeah.
Because simply the clubs won't be able to afford to do it. And as I say, I don't think it's such a bad thing. And if that means players end up staying at a club for 2 or 3 or 4 years and really enjoying it and getting to know a really good bunch of mates, having a really good social life, well, that's fantastic. That's what rugby was about and can still be about. Some players now have 4 teams in 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Well, so you ask them, what was your club? When they retire. Well, it's they give you a list of like 7 dwarfs or something like this. They haven't got a club. And I think, again, maybe looking through old school lenses, but I do think, maybe going back to that sort of thing is going to be part of the positive things that happen out of the current situation.
Do you think that will have an impact on the top end salaries as well, because of this situation? So you see Premiership salaries fall down as well.
Smaller squads straight away, got to be.
Yeah.
So where are those players going to go?
Yeah. And an interesting idea, like Paul Renouf has asked, how do you think the Super 6 idea in Scotland will pan out, and could this be used in England? So obviously in Scotland, what they've done is they've offered 6 places for a division that goes between their pro sides and their club rugby. Is that something that could work? A smaller feeder league of between the Championship and Premiership?
I mean, I suppose it's a little bit like the ITM is in New Zealand, isn't it? I suppose, where club players get to play with full-time pros and that sort of stuff. But I mean, with the greatest of respect to the SRU, I haven't seen an awful lot about the Super 6.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And we've got some specific questions for Phil on the Leeds side. Do you think the branding changing from Leeds to Yorkshire was a big factor in not reaching the Premiership again?
I don't think it had anything to do with branding. I think it was more to do with missed tackles and drop goals, or it was more on the field stuff, really. Look, I wasn't there at the time, and I don't really know what the motivation was to go from Leeds to Leeds to Yorkshire. You listen to people. I'm not sure it was that universally welcomed, but when you listen to people, but everything I know about it, it's all sort of hearsay more than actual facts, really, Alex. And as I said, for me, it was we're based in Leeds, and where we should be called Leeds, but that's just a personal opinion. But I know a lot of other people sort of share that view as well. And just adding on to what Steve and Paul have said about local, that's important. That a lot of the lads who are keen to help with the rebuild and want to who have reconnected with the club again, are all Leeds lads, or they lived in Harrogate, which is or the Leeds and the surrounding areas. You know, and that's going to be important moving forward. And, you know, that's how, as Steve said, you can get players there. You know, years ago, we had players like Tom Palmer, who played 8-9 years for the club, coming in as an academy player and staying there all the way through. So, you know, I think to create a real identity and a real team ethic, team spirit, you know, it's great to have local boys. And I think what is happening now will encourage that more than it has for quite a number of years, I believe.
And another one from Jess. When you arrived back at Leeds, did you have to change or create the culture or set culture pillars for the players, or did you use an existing one?
Yeah, we just looked at a couple of basic things in terms of playing. We talked about maybe, you know, being a little bit more direct and difficult to beat. Maybe the directness came, the difficult to beat perhaps didn't. But we were getting there. We looked at changing. We didn't look at changing too much. We looked at building on, you know, some of the good stuff that was there previously. You know, we talked a lot about, you know, about mental skills, being able to cope with the expectation or the pressure of trying to win matches. So we try to talk about that. So there wasn't a sort of a hidden thing. We spoke about it, but we did then focus on a process of preparation rather than, you know, the outcome of the results, because we had a lot of young players there, you know, get pretty nervous. So it was all about the process. You know, making sure we behaved well off the field, turning up on time, and all those basic things, and you know, and trying to develop a spirit from there.
And so one thing across all of you, what do you guys miss most about rugby?
The company.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was always told that when you finish playing rugby, you'll lack the company, and it's your mates, isn't it? Really, wherever you play, whatever club you've been in, you've always got your mates. Like Phil said earlier on, like a lot of my mates, like from when I first started playing, we've got this. It's just formed in the last 2 weeks of WhatsApp with Newbridge Rugby Club, players that I've not spoke to for a long time, and it wouldn't have happened but for this, you know. But it's about the company you keep, and it's the same wherever you go, really.
Phil, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's, you know, I mean, it's, you know, I've been doing this, the other two lads, a long time, and it keeps me young. You know, working with guys, you know, 18 to 28, the vast majority of them, it keeps me young. You know, it's and I thoroughly enjoy the crack and the company. You know, I mean, my wife still can't work out why I go on tour every season, and it's because you just laugh all the time. You know, and you know, it's I've run out of jokes to tell her at the moment, so she's not, and she doesn't laugh a great deal anyway. But she hasn't had me home on a Tuesday and a Thursday night for the last 20 odd years, so it's very strange. But no, missing the guys definitely, and everybody involved with the club.
Phil?
Yeah, same. The company. You know, what I like nowadays is you do have a sort of a group of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, but then you may have a group of sort of 29, 30, 31-year-olds, and seeing the way that all those guys interact and the different types of banter, and seeing the older guys just, you know, rolling their eyes when some of the younger guys talk out to school or whatever it might be. It's just great fun. It's a dynamic of being together with your mates and having a good crack and a bit of fun. It's a great way coaching. You know, I haven't missed not playing. I did couple of years. The first couple of years I stopped playing, but since then coaching is an amazing sort of, or being involved in rugby in some way, shape or form, close to the coalface like we are, is fantastic.
And like, just thinking of positive, one of the questions here was basically asking and saying, has this given you a chance to look at some of the things you do, some of the programs, and make changes? Is that one thing that's good, that you've had a chance to reflect on things and you want to make positive changes?
I mean, I think during the season we're all very time poor, you know, and then, you know, certainly at National 1 level, you know, you get 8 weeks and it starts again. And so you know, I think, yeah, being have the time to, you know, to chat to the coaches, to chat to the players, you know, and to reach out to the players. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things we're going to put in place. We've got a bit of a survey we're putting together to ask all the players in the men's section, the women's section, your thoughts on the club and, what goes well, what doesn't go well, how would you improve things? Because, there's some really intelligent, articulate individuals out there, and they'll come up with some good ideas, stuff that you don't, recognise or realise. So yeah, I think time for reflection is really good, and we've certainly got plenty of that at the moment. So hopefully we'll use it in a positive way.
Great. Well, look, thank you very much, everyone. That's all we've got time for. We're going to have another week next week. Please register for next week's, which is going to be, we're going to have an S&C coach here. We're also going to have a couple of other sort of elite coaches who are going to be talking about how they're looking to try to keep their players sharp, what kind of times they might need it. So please register for that now. Obviously, it goes without saying, make sure you subscribe to the Rugby Journal. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you to our panel. Thanks, Paul, Phil, and Steve. And stay safe, everyone. And see you all soon, hopefully, on the other side. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks, Alex.
You boys.
Take care.
Cheers.